So hi everybody, I'm Patrick from Berlin. I work for eBay. And I'm going to talk to you about how to get rich quick using React Context. React Context has been totally revamped in the latest version of React 16.3. And there are many use cases for it. I found one use case for myself where I was able to solve a problem that I had rather elegantly. And that problem was to get rich, because eBay, big company, they need to make a lot of money. How do you make a lot of money? Well, you put some advertising on your page, of course. So last year, I was working on this brand new project, greenfield approach, all the works, React, of course, and I was having a lot of fun writing absolutely beautiful componentized code. And they came to me and said, OK, Patrick, we're going to have to make some money. You're going to have to put some ads on your page. I said, OK, well, if we can't help it, I guess we'll have to do that. So let me take a look at the code examples that are provided by Google for their ad server. It's called Google DoubleClick for Publishers. And I looked at that code and I said, oh, this has global state all over the place, and the code examples are a horrible mess. And I looked at what my colleagues did for other projects, and I thought, oh, I'm going to ruin my nice architecture with this stupid advertising code. That's not going to stand. So what can I do about it? I found this way to just nicely encapsulate all this ugliness into nice React components, and that's where context came in handy. So just to give you a short demo of how this is done, I have an advertising provider component here, which I pass my configuration that will tell the ad server how to configure the various slots on my page that display advertising. And that's all set up now. So now anywhere in my DOM, in my layout, I can put the other component, the advertising slot component, in there. It has an ID. In this case, it's called Super Banner. And there it is, getting richer by the minute now. Let's put in another one. Another advertising slot is called the rectangle. Yep. Here we go. Great. So everything happy. I only have two components on my page that hide everything, all the ugliness of actually talking to the ad server. And behind the scenes, if this is my page on a mobile phone, I have my advertising provider. When the advertising provider mounts, it constructs a module, internal module called advertising with all the configuration. And then the advertising module takes care of talking to that ad server in the cloud, says, OK, initialize these ad slots for me, please. And then do whatever black magic you do. Then there's the advertising slot. It passes the ID to the advertising module. And then the ad server can do its dirty work. Dirty work involves something like an online auction where various people in the web, various bidders are bidding to fill the ad slot in real time. It's all really complicated stuff. I don't really want to know a lot about this. And so here's our placement. Ta-da! The ad server just uses the div that I'm rendering with my component into my page, and I'm getting rich. So how does context work? So context is a great tool for doing that, as I've shown you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works and how you can use it. It's kind of like a tin can phone that you might use from your childhood days. It's a bit of a weird analogy, but it worked for me to understand the basic concept. It all comes down to having a provider and a consumer component. And everything that I put into the provider, the consumer components, one or many consumer components somewhere in my React component tree can consume. And with a demo example that I just showed you, it works something like this. I have this context module. I have a function provided by React called create context, where I'm creating my context that gives me the provider and the consumer. So what's important about this is that this is actually a singleton. So the create context function is just called when the advertising context module is loaded. And then this is the unique identifier for this particular context use case of communicating. Advertising provider then just simply imports the provider part from this context. And this is where when it initializes my advertising module with a configuration that hides all the ugly code black magic. And what am I passing down as a value? It's just the single function, the single method of my advertising module that's called activate. And with this activate method, I can actually get things going. And this is what the components then use to actually put some advertising on the page. This is the advertising slot component, which gets the consumer from the context. As you can see here, this is a render prop. So the advertising consumer just expects as children object a function that puts the value that has been put into the provider as an argument. And in my case, this is the activate method. And then I can just pass this to my advertising slot component. And the beauty of it is that once I hook it up here, and I can put this in also in a hawk, something called with advertising, whatever. Once I do this, then I can have just a regular component, and everything is just props. So there's no special state or context or anything. It's just one prop that's called activate, which I get from my provider, and one prop called ID, which I just use to put the component in my layout. And then it just renders a simple div. It's very, very plain. Just a div with a regular HTML element ID that is the props ID. And this is used by the advertising server to put the placement on the page. Okay, perhaps a quick look at the difference between the old way of using context with the shiny new way of using context. In the old way, which was Facebook themselves on their page said, well, this is hacky and this is dirty and you probably don't want to use it. If you're a library author, then it might make sense to you, but please think twice. And it was messy for a lot of reasons. One reason was that it would actually use prop types to identify the context. So here you have the provider child context types, and then the consumer would have the same context types, and the communication would work by matching these context types. And you can imagine if you happen, for some reason, to have a context type that also is the same, but it's used for a different use case, then you would have hard to track down bugs. Also, you could not use pure functional components here. It's all just class components because you need to call this getChildContext method, which is bad for performance. And in the shiny new world, as I've just shown you, you can use functional components. This is a very, very basic, simple example where I'm just passing a string from the consumer, from the provider to the consumer. Okay. So that's it, basically. It's a lightning talk, and we want to get rich quick. We want to get rich quick in less than 30 minutes. But perhaps one last thing, don't use it for everything. That's what they warn about on the documentation. I guess it makes good sense because you could theoretically build your whole application on contexts passing around somewhere, but that would probably become unwieldy for a complex application quickly. But it does make sense if you have cross-cutting concerns like internationalization, layout theming, tracking, and in my case, advertising. So it's a nice new tool we have in our toolbox, which is now okay to use because it's not that hacky anymore. And I recommend to use it for these cross-cutting concerns. And if you actually are in the same position as me and have to integrate Google DoubleClick for publishers for some reason, perhaps to earn money, then I could, as a last thing, recommend to you React Prebit. So the demo that I just made is based on a library that I wrote, which we are open sourcing on GitHub. So you can just use that to configure your advertising and put it on your page. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I'll post the material. And yeah, have a nice day.